Hello and welcome to this video. This is me reading a book that is out of copyright called Cuneiform Parallels to the Old Testament. The tablets were translated and edited by Robert William Rogers in 1912. I'll let the preface go ahead then. As I read on, I'll add my own comments as to what I believe they mean.
Preface. Early in the history of Assyriology, Professor Eberhard Schrader of Berlin published his Keilenschriften und das Alte Testament, Gießen, 1872, which appeared in a second edition, rewritten and doubled in size, Gießen, 1883, and was then translated into English by the Reverend Owen C. Whitehouse, London, 1885. In this great book, the Assyrian and Babylonian inscription material illustrative of the Old Testament was collected under the biblical passages in transliteration and translation. In German or in English dress, this book went everywhere. Every student of Hebrew or of Assyrian consulted it. Every Old Testament commentator quoted from it or made reference to it. Its influence was incalculable. The rapid progress of exploration, decipherment and explanation soon left it antiquated, and the eagerly desired new edition appeared, entirely rewritten by Professors Heinrich Zimmern and Hugo Winkler, Berlin, 1902, and upon a new plan. In this new edition, far more learned than the former and crowded with matter of high importance, suggestive, brilliant, instructive, the original texts, as Schrader had given them, were omitted and their place supplied by elaborate discussion of all the questions involved. The loss of the inscription material was partially supplied by the exceedingly useful Keilenschriftliches Textbuch zum Alten Testament by Professor Winkler, Leipzig, 1st edition 1892, 2nd 1903, 3rd 1909, which gave in transliteration and translation the important historical and mythological texts necessary to the understanding of the Old Testament. Shortly after the publication of the 3rd edition of Schrader's book, I began the collection and translation of inscriptions with the purpose of supplying to English readers a complete corpus of all the Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian inscriptions which are parallel to or illustrative of the Old Testament. I had then no idea that it would grow to so great a size, or that its preparation would occupy so long a series of years, or that the labour involved would be so arduous. I should hardly have dared to undertake with a light heart a task which has taxed my energies during many an hour between lectures and absorbed nearly all my summer holidays since it began. It has indeed cost so much that my early hopes and enthusiasm for it have slipped away, and, like Johnson with his dictionary, I therefore dismiss it with frigid tranquillity, having little to fear or hope from censure or from praise. The plan involves a number of very different kinds of scholarship, in all of which no man dare pretend equally to excel. In the first place, the texts are all translated into English, and they come from almost every type of cuneiform literature, and every type has its specialists. For the thoroughness and skill with which this fundamental task has been done, I can only claim to have spent many years upon the historical and chronological texts as a specialty, and to have worked diligently and independently, and sought carefully to know all that my colleagues have produced on the other fields. I hope that the translations represent fairly well the present state of the science of Assyriology, and I have confidence that experts will find not a few cases in which progress has been made beyond previous editions of others. The transcriptions are printed to make possible the control of the translations, without immediate recourse to the widely scattered original texts. They will be useful not only to those who have actually studied Assyrian, but almost equally to those who know Hebrew or other Semitic languages. There are, I fear, some uneven places in the transliteration, ever a pitfall in all languages, but they will probably serve sufficiently their practical purpose. The introductions, especially those which deal with the historical sections, are intended to enable the ordinary reader to find the relationship between the text which follows and the period or situation to which it belongs. I could easily have made them much more extensive had I chosen to thresh out every theory and make every possible comparison with the Old Testament. The purpose of the book was, however, very different. My idea was to supply the materials and let the student exercise his own judgment upon them. It would be a most useful reformation in much of our academic and even of our graduate teaching if our pupils were compelled to do a little more for themselves. Here, assembled in one book, are the texts. Here the absolutely necessary fundamental materials for the understanding of their bearing, and here also references to the publications of the original cuneiform texts, and to the most important discussions already held concerning them. I venture to hope that professors, teachers, and preachers who wish to lecture upon the manifold relations between Palestine and Babylonia and Assyria will here find the means by which they may introduce themselves, and especially their pupils, directly to the sources. I believe that this book contains the largest body of cuneiform literature yet assembled in any language for the illustration of the Old Testament. I have had much encouragement and some help from colleagues on both sides of the sea during the years spent upon the work. It would be impossible to name them all, and it may seem invidious to mention any. It ought, however, to be said that Professor Stephen Langdon of Oxford has read in manuscript most of the religious texts and has pointed out a number of amendments and improvements. My friend, Professor Brino of Princeton, has read the whole book in proof and has helped me in many places to find errors and inconsistencies which a mind polarized by so many rereadings of the same matter had failed to observe. I know of no way adequately to express my gratitude for these services. As I now set the book on its journey, I find myself wishing that others had seen this or that within its covers before the type had placed it beyond correction. This desire comes to me the more readily because in the writing of it I have silently corrected literally hundreds of mistakes made by my predecessors in translations and in transcriptions. I may surely anticipate the discovery by others of many mistakes of my own. But, as Johnson said, it is surely time to quote him again. I soon found that it is too late to look for instruments when the work calls for execution, and that whatever abilities I had brought to my task, with those I must finally perform it. To deliberate whenever I doubted, to inquire whenever I was ignorant, would have protracted the undertaking without end, and perhaps without much improvement, for I did not find by my first experiments that what I had not of my own was easily to be obtained. I saw that one inquiry only gave occasion to another, that book referred to book, that to search was not always to find, and to find was not always to be informed, and that thus to pursue perfection was, like the first inhabitants of Arcadia, to chase the sun, which, when they had reached the hill where he seemed to rest, was still beheld at the same distance from them. My obligations to the books and papers which have been published in this field before me are acknowledged with almost meticulous scrupulousness on every page. I have been so fearful of robbing somebody's treasure that I have printed references of acknowledgment in many cases where I had already reached the same conclusion long before. If I have overlooked anyone in this distribution of footnote compliments, here's an apology to him, and a letter will follow as soon as my attention is drawn to the matter. The book was practically completed long ago, and its publication delayed by the absurd demands made upon American scholars by the machinery amid which many of them are compelled to sacrifice their larger usefulness. The delay has, however, permitted me to compare my translations with the admirable work of Professor Arthur Ungnad in Gressmann's Allorientalische Texte und Bilder, to my profit in many cases and to my comfort in all. I am under special obligations also to Professor Ungnad's treatment of the Hammurapi Code in his joint work with Professor Kohler. I doubt whether this work of his has yet found adequate appreciation at the hands of other scholars. I have adopted so many suggestions from him that it seemed impossible to acknowledge every one of them in footnotes. Earnestly and eagerly do I hope that the book may prove useful, may help some inquiring mind, or, most wonderful boon, may rouse some young mind to an interest in, or even to lifelong devotion to, the study of the ancient Orient. When I am animated by this wish, here is Johnson again to relieve the tedium of this long preface, I look with pleasure on my book, however defective, and deliver it to the world with the spirit of a man that has endeavoured well. Robert W. Rogers, The Bodleian Library, Oxford, September 13, 1911.
Here is a small tablet translation. I'll add my own voice to the audio when something I feel needs to be said. Before I start, you'll hear the word created. I have a feeling in this tablet it should really have been appointed or selected.
A cosmology in a ritual. This fragmentary ritual found at Babylon was first published by F. H. Weisbach, Babylonische Miscellen, 1903. The ritual was to be used when a temple had fallen and had to be restored. As a part of the ritual, this interesting cosmological passage was recited after various offerings of bread, honey, butter, and oil had been made. When Anu created the heavens, Nudimmud created the ocean, his dwelling, Ea, in the ocean, broke off the clay.
Nudimmud is also known as Enki. In this tablet he is selecting people for jobs to do.
He created the god of bricks to renew the houses. He created reed and forest for building work. He created the god of carpenters, the god of smiths and Arazu, to complete building work. He created mountains and seas for all. He created the god of goldsmiths, the god of smiths, the god of masons, and the god of miners for work, and their rich produce for sacrificial gifts. He created Ashnan and Lakar, Sirus, Ningishzida, Ninsar, and Kam to make the offerings numerous, 35. He created Umutaan and who hold the sacrifices in the hand. He created Azagsuga, the high priest of the great gods, to complete the commands and ordinances. He created the king to adorn the shrines of the gods. He created men to carry on. Worship. Anil, Eyul, Ea.
This part, he created men to carry on, worship. The translator has put worship, but we know men means us humans, so to create humans to carry on worship doesn't make sense. If that was the case, it would have been, he created men to worship. I think what it's saying is, he created men to carry the baskets. We know this has already been said in the translation called Enki and Ninma, so it appears the tablet was something people would say after offering bread and honey, etc., to their god. Here's another tablet. The translators have called the creation of the moon and the sun. But I think it's actually the tablet telling us the Anunnaki changed from their years, which was called Shars to Earth years. The difference would be 3,600 Earth years to one Shar. So I think this is telling us they went with the 12-month Earth calendar because we know Enki, Enlil and King Anu were not around when the sun was formed.
The creation of the moon and the sun. When the gods, An, Enlil and Ea, the great gods, through their unchangeable counsel and powerful commands, fixed the crescent of the moon, to cause the new moon to shine forth, to create the month, 5 signs for heaven and earth they fixed. The new moon which was created in heaven with majesty, in the midst of heaven arose. Version. When Anu, Enlil and Ea, the great gods, through their unchangeable counsel, fixed the forms of heaven and earth, and to the hands of the great gods entrusted them, to create the day and to renew the month, as signs for mankind, men saw Shamash in the gate of his going forth. In the midst of heaven and earth they commanded him faithfully.
Another version of the creation of the world by Marduk, so-called Bilingual of Creation. This interesting text formed merely the introduction to an incantation which was intended to be recited in honor of Ezida, the great temple of Nabi at Borsippa, in King.
Nabi, the Mesopotamian god of wisdom and writing, was primarily worshipped in the Ezida temple at Borsippa near Babylon.
It was found in 1882 in the ruins of Abu Haba by Hormuzd Rasim and is preserved both in Sumerian and in Assyrian. Though so different from the main story of the creation, it belongs to the same set of political ideas which made use of ancient religious material to justify the position of Marduk at the head of the Babylonian pantheon. The holy house, the house of the gods, in the holy place, had not yet been made. No reed had sprung up, no tree had been created, no brick had been laid, no mould had been fashioned, no house had been made, no city had been built, no city had been made, no creature had been established. Nippur had not been made, Akur had not been built, Erech had not been made, Eana had not been built.
These are cities.
The deep had not been made, Eridu had not been built. The holy house, the house of the gods, the dwelling had not been made. All lands were sea. When the middle of the sea was a water basin.
This is interesting because this was before the flood, suggesting the ocean was surrounded by land, unlike now, which we have land surrounded by ocean.
In those days Eridu was made, Esagil was built, Esagil
was the central temple complex dedicated to the chief Babylonian god Marduk,
where in the midst of the deep the god Lugal-dul-Azaga dwelt.
Lugal-dul-Azaga, also known as Ninurta.
Babylon was made, and Esagil was finished. The gods, the Anunnaki, he made at one time. The holy city, the dwelling of the heart's desire, they proclaimed supreme. Marduk laid a reed work upon the face of the waters, he formed dust and poured it out upon the reed work. To cause the gods to dwell in a habitation of their heart's desire, he formed mankind. The goddess Aruru, with him, created the seed of mankind.
Aruru, Ninhursag, also known as Ninmah.
The beasts of the field and living things in the field he created. He created the Tigris and the Euphrates, and SEF'd them in their place. Their names he did well declare. The grass, the rush of the marsh, the reed, and the forest he created. The green herb of the field he created, the lands, the marshes, and the swamps. The wild cow and her young, the wild calf, the ewe and her young, the lamb of the fold, gardens and forests, the he-goat and the mountain goat. Him, the Lord Marduk filled in a dam by the side of the sea. The swamp. He established a marsh. He caused to exist. Reeds he created, trees he created. He made in their place. Bricks he laid, a mould he fashioned. Houses he made, cities he built. Cities he made, creatures he created. Nippur he made, Akur he built.
Erech he made, Uruk, also known as Erech in the Bible.
Erech he made, Eana he built.
Eana he built. Eana. This was the temple complex dedicated to the goddess Inanna, also known as Ishtar. This is the end for part 1. By the time I've finished, there will probably be about 10 parts to this. I hope you're enjoying learning a bit about the lives of our gods. I have a little treat for you in a moment, but if you want to learn way much more, please visit my website, ourtruehistory.co.uk. Here is the treat, if you haven't already seen it. It's a crash course on the Anunnaki, created by me. I have hundreds of documentaries on my website, ourtruehistory.co.uk. Enjoy.
A crash course on the Anunnaki from the foremost expert, Our True History.
The Anunnaki's home planet is in our solar system. It's about 4 to 10 times the size of Earth, based off of the description of the Enuma Elish and other tablets. The Anunnaki came from just that planet. I know there are bad researchers out there that say they are also from different planets in other solar systems. There is zero evidence for this. The reason why they say that is because there's carvings of stars, and the bad researchers have assumed the Anunnaki were telling us they come from there. However, if you watch my amazing documentary called How Did the Anunnaki Know About Our Solar System, I show their planet came from another solar system, 4.5 billion years ago. So if they are carving another solar system, then it might be showing their planet originated from there. I show evidence in that documentary. The planet called Nibiru has an orbit that takes 3,600 years to go to the outer solar system and then back round in between Jupiter and Mars. When their planet first entered our solar system, it smashed into a planet called Tiamat that broke up and became Earth and the asteroid belt. The planet it smashed into, called Tiamat, also had a moon called Kingu, and Kingu ended up becoming our moon. The Anunnaki are not reptilian. The reason why a few bad researchers say they are is because they have seen these small statues and believe they are reptilian Anunnaki. However, there are only 2 of these squashed clay figures compared to the thousands, if not tens of thousands, of carvings showing what they really look like, which is us. They look like us because we were created in their image, in their likeness, as it says in Genesis 1:26, and also in the 14 tablets in Columbia University that are owned by the Rothschilds. The Anunnaki's race name is actually gods. There is a huge amount of evidence for this. Please visit www.ourtruehistory.co.uk and scroll down on the homepage to where it says click here. You can see all the evidence there.
Here is a small part of that video showing the Anunnaki were called gods.
There was 900 Anunnaki originally came down. Anunnaki wasn't the actual original name for the race. I believe the race name is gods, or God, just like humans. And obviously it was down the line, it was translated into Elohim, and obviously we all praise gods, but people would praise humans if we went to their planet and created workers. When you break down the word Anunnaki, it actually does end up with the word Kai, which is the last word, being earth, and Kai is an actual name for earth back from them days. So it makes sense that the actual breakdown, which is how Zechariah Sitchin did it, Anunnaki, those that came from heaven, to earth, ki being earth.
JKI, place. Today's word is ki, which means place. It can also mean ground or earth, and is a term for the netherworld. Ki is also used as a determinative indicating something is the name of a place, but instead of being put before the place name, as is usual for determinatives, it's put after the place name. Lagash Kai, for example, to talk about the city of Lagash. You will find that everywhere except that Kai is the meaning of earth. There is nowhere that says Ki means princely seeds or royal blood or anything that Dr. Michael S. Heiser said it does.
The name Anunnaki roughly translates to those from heaven came to earth, and that's a team name for the older gods that were here on earth. The younger gods were called the Ajiji, meaning watchers or eye in the sky. They were called that because they were the ones that were on Mars as an away station, waiting for their planet to come near.
Some really bad researchers have said the Igigi were created by the Anunnaki, gods, and were slaves to the Anunnaki. That's because they didn't research properly and read this part of the text in the tablets called Artra Hassis. Tablet 1. The great Anunnaki made the Igigi. It does seem they made them, however the line under it says, carry the workload sevenfold, so when you read it properly it says this, the great Anunnaki made the Igigi, carry the workload sevenfold. The documentary I mentioned before on my website has the full evidence the Igigi were the sons of gods. You might know them in the Bible as the sons of God that took wives.
Heaven is space. Yes, in the Bible, as well as in the ancient texts, it talks about we can see the sun, the stars, and the moon in heaven. That means we can see heaven. Of course we can't see heaven. So where do you think the sun, the moon, and the stars are? In space. So when next time you read either the Bible or any of the ancient texts, when they're talking about going up into heaven in their chariots, yes, they're going up in spaceships. Because Nibiru smashed into Tiamat and that created Earth, Nibiru had life on that planet and seeded Tiamat, which became Earth. This means we got life from Nibiru to start all life here on Earth. The Anunnaki came to Earth because they had issues with their atmosphere. They believed that sprinkling gold particles in the atmosphere would help it repair. Their planet had very small amount of gold. They tried mining the asteroid belt but lost 2 spaceships. There was a fight for rulership on Nibiru about 460,000 years ago, and their loser, called Alula, lost and fled in a ship to Earth. He found gold and told the others via some type of radio.
The reverse side of Moorhen Collection Akkadian Tablet MC2894A. Alalu set his course for snowy Earth, but kept his destination a secret. Alalu went to off-limits places. No one had been there before, and no one at the Hammered Bracelet had tried to cross there.
This is the description of what it was like on their planet while the hole in their atmosphere was there.
There was less joy in the land. The rain stopped, and the winds got more robust. The amount of gas that volcanoes blew out didn't get worse, and the hole in the atmosphere didn't get fixed. Nibiru's circuits kept going around in the sky. It got harder to handle the heat and cold from circuit to circuit.
The first 50 Anunnaki came to Earth and set up a base. They called that place Eridu. Archaeologists agree that the oldest structures and location anywhere is in Eridu. The Anunnaki gods were 8 to 12 foot tall. They ended up mining in South Africa. We have evidence of ancient gold mines there. There are older mines in Africa that have been covered over with sand, mud, silt and sediment from the Great Flood. To see the evidence and everything you need to know about the Great Flood, visit my website and search for the Great Flood. But the work was hard for the Ajiji, the younger gods, and they demanded help. The main Anunnaki were Enki and his half-brother Enlil. They were in charge. Enlil, although younger, was the main leader. They were sons of King Anu. King Anu mostly stayed on their planet Nibiru. This means Enki and Enlil were princes. Enki, one of the 2 princes, said he would create a new upgraded version of a creature here on Earth, Neanderthal. Enki did this. Read the translations called Enki and Nimna. And the first Homo sapien was born. The Anunnaki then created 7 more males and 7 females to breed. They were dark-skinned and was put to work in the mines in South Africa. They called that the Abzu. This happened around 300,000 years ago. The Homo sapiens couldn't talk, but they just about understood commands. These were the first Homo sapiens on Earth, and they were called Adamu. Do not confuse Adamu with Adam and Eve. I'll get to them later. Adamu means father of mankind, or humanity or mankind. Many people attach Adamu with Adam. You'll see later why that's wrong. Because of the long orbit of their planet, 1 day on their planet is 30 days here on Earth. This means they would live for over 500,000 years here on Earth. They would seem immortal to us. 200,000 years after creating Homo sapiens, the Anunnaki started to breed with the Homo sapiens. They had children and they were called demigods. Half Anunnaki and half human. Demigods. The first children born to an Anunnaki were 2 children we know as Adam and Eve. This is because the Prince Enki bred with 2 Homo sapien females, which he then called them Dawn and Dusk. The time of day they gave birth the boy and girl. Adam and Eve proper names are Adapa and Titi. If you want to see the full evidence of this, visit my website. These new Homo sapiens could speak and were smarter than the Homo sapiens. Enki put his new children on his orbiting spaceship for the first 24 years of their life. If you want to see evidence of this, visit my website and search Adam and Eve. The garden was on the spaceship, and another Anunnaki didn't like the fact their god's bloodline has been tainted by Enki having human children. So he told Adam and Eve to eat a fruit from a tree that Enki had already told them not to. Some of the children had gigantism, which means they were even bigger than the Anunnaki parent, who was about 8 to 12 foot tall. Those children who had gigantism were called the Nephilim. This religious site says this about the Nephilim. I'll explain more after. The Nephilim, the product of the sons of God mingling with the daughters of Adam, the great biblical giants, the fallen ones, the Rephaim, the dead ones. These descriptions are all applied to one group of characters found within the Hebrew Bible. Who are the Nephilim? From where do the heroes of old, the men of renown, come? The problem with the religious view is that they have mixed up Adamu and Adam. It's possible that the Nephilim were from Homo sapien, Adamu, or from Homo sapien sapien, because the Anunnaki bred with the Homo sapiens to give birth to Homo sapien sapien, but then they also bred with Homo sapien sapien. The reason why religious people say they are the product of the sons of God and not God is because the Igigi, remember the younger gods, were the ones that came down and stole human women. The Igigi, watchers, were then called the fallen angels. They were outcast for a period of time, and those Igigi that had kids allowed their giant children to eat everything, including other humans. Because their planet was not near Earth, you can probably guess they were pale-skinned. This is said many times in ancient texts because their offspring with humans were pale, blue-eyed and white hair. Noah was also a direct child from Enki and a Homo sapien woman called Banash. That's why Enki wanted to save Noah. That's why Noah had blonde hair, blue eyes, pale skin, compared to Lamech, who was Banash's husband. He was dark-skinned. You can see all of the evidence of this on my documentary called The Great Flood. Please see my video. It's free to watch. Search Great Flood on ourtruehistory.co.uk. Some people have made a big thing about the Anunnaki holding bags and carvings. Sadly, they didn't bother to research. The bags are just leather bags. Not only do they tell us they had bags in text, there's also one in the Cairo Museum. None of the carvings of the Anunnaki gods show pockets, so there's no mystery. They just needed bags. The women Anunnaki, or goddesses, were never in charge the same way men were. They were still respected, but never abused. They were never told to wear any clothes they didn't want to. They had no face coverings, unless it was hot and it was their choice. Inanna became an exception to women in charge. She was a descendant from the bloodline of Enlil. She rose to power because of her beauty and cunning skills. In the end, she was feared as the goddess of sex and war. You may have noticed the Anunnaki have many different names. That's because they lived so long on Earth they could change their name, but also because in different places they were known as different names. Inanna is the ancient Sumerian goddess of love, sensuality, fertility, procreation, and also of war. She later became identified by the Akkadians and Assyrians as the goddess Ishtar, and further with the Hittite Sauska, the Phoenician Astarte, and the Greek Aphrodite, among many others. You'll see the Anunnaki posed for the statues and carvings. You've seen Inanna standing on lions. In India she was known as Kali, with the same type of pose. You might notice in some places they are coloured blue. That simply means sky gods. The reason we see the gods with wings is again showing sky gods when there was no colour added. If you would like to see the world's best Anunnaki family tree, with many of the names added from what they were called, simply visit my website, ourtruehistory.co.uk. The men Anunnaki, they had long hair, allowed it to grow. They would put it in a turban, or sometimes under a hat. They also grew beards. Beards appeared to be a status symbol. In their beards, they would braid lapis lazuli, which is a gemstone. The Anunnaki loved lapis lazuli, so much so the other brother, called Enlil, had a lapis lazuli throne made for him. Enlil was the main god on earth. In fact, the Bible even tells us that that god had a lapis lazuli throne. I can't imagine an almighty deity needing to sit down, but in the Bible, God sits down 20 times. Of course, the Bible is a copy of the Anunnaki text. Visit my website and scroll down to where it says, click here in big blue letters. I mentioned before that Noah was Enki's son. Noah's original name was Ziusudra. We know this because we actually have the original tablet in the British Museum, and that tablets tells us that Enki gave instructions to Ziusudra to be a conical boat, not a long boat. It was like a partly squashed football. The boat didn't have to do anything other than survive the tsunami. I'll explain about that soon. The tablet even tells the size of the ark and what wood it needs to be made from. The head curator of the British Museum has gave a lecture on it. You can find this on YouTube. Search Irvin Finkel, Noah's Ark. Before I carry on, I thought I'd let you know that although I'm talking about the Anunnaki in this video, I actually have researched so much more and have solved so many unanswered mysteries, if I may just tell you some of them. Have connected the Book of Enoch, ancient stone tablets, to Stonehenge. I have shown who made and what the carvings of what looks like a helicopter and spacecrafts in Abydos, Egypt, are. I have given the answer to who was at Atlantis, when and what happened to it. I have given the only decent explanation on why the Nazca 28-kilometre mountain range had the top sliced off. I've explained the reason for the granite boxes in the pyramids. I've created a 23-minute documentary using evidence on who the father of Jesus would have been. I believe I've worked out how and why we have elongated skulls in ancient times that were not head-bound. I am the person that worked out the 10 plagues of Egypt actually started in Israel. Göbekli Tepe, I have explained what it was for and who made it. I have made the best documentary on mermaids. I have shown who Lucifer was. I have shown who Satan was. I have put out the evidence that Jesus' father was not who you think he was. I even show the Bible named him over and over. I have gave details on why and when Easter Island had the statues. It's not when you think. I have shown evidence where the crystal skulls are not debunked. I even show evidence that the people that debunked it are not telling the whole truth. I have shown Adam and Eve were on a spaceship for the first 24 years of their life. And much more, all with evidence. The Anunnaki ate the same foods as us. They ate fish, wild animals, and even bugs. They would heat their meat up. They brought down from their planet sheep, goats, and even barley. They drank wine and beer. You're wondering, did we learn how to make beer from the Anunnaki? Yes, here's a direct translation from a tablet. Inanna and Enki, CUL 1.3.1. So it came about that Enki and Inanna were drinking beer together in the Abzu and enjoying the taste of sweet wine. The bronze agar vessels were filled to the brim, and the two of them started a competition, drinking from the bronze vessels of Urash. As you can see, they were drinking beer and wine before we were even created. They played games. They laughed, loved, had anger and hate. They had the 7 deadly sins. They cried. They even cried when the earth was flooded over and humans were dying. I'll get to the flood soon. The women Anunnaki wore makeup. The men and women had jewellery, mostly gemstones. There may be a reason why so much gemstones were used. Gemstones appear to have healing properties. Maybe the Anunnaki knew this. The Anunnaki should have slept for 30 days and nights, because that's how long they would need to sleep, but they managed to stay awake 7 days and nights, then sleep 7 days and nights. This affected their health. In the tablets in Columbia University, the Anunnaki spoke about the creatures here on Earth, Neanderthals, and said they think that's what they were like. This means they know evolution and didn't believe they were created. However, they do mention the creator of everything. However, I have worked out the name that the Anunnaki gave to the creator of everything. Yep, visit my website. The Anunnaki never asked humans to sacrifice themselves. Way later, when humans were having trouble with crops, they would ask the gods for help. But the Anunnaki gods couldn't make rain, so they humans thought the gods were upset with them. They started to sacrifice animals, but that didn't work, and humans killed other humans in the hope that one of the many gods would help them. The Anunnaki never had a religion. People worshipped a god that was in control of that area. For example, Marduk was the god of Babylon, and anyone in that area worshipped him, regardless if they liked him. Think of being forced to worship. That's not a religion, that's control. The Anunnaki kept tight control over the humans. The Tower of Babel was a tower Marduk was making using humans. Enlil didn't like a tower that would be bigger than his, so Enlil got it shot down by Ninurta in his chariot. Yes, they called some of their craft chariots. Enlil then forced people to learn new languages, so they couldn't all work together to help Marduk again. The Great Flood. Here's a clip from my 1-hour documentary on the Great Flood. You can see the full documentary on my website.
And in Gilgamesh, to anticipate what I'm going to say by the end of the talk, the flood is bound up with knowledge.
I disagree. I think Noah tells Gilgamesh that the gods are an alien race. We know that Gilgamesh's mother is an Anunnaki. It says it in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Of course, a museum can't say the word aliens, so they have to say something else. But Noah would have met all the Anunnaki on the top of the mountain where the boat rested.
Here's a few versions of what happened the day of the flood. The Anunnaki allowed an ice shelf to break off Antarctica because they believed in destiny. Their planet Nibiru was due to come around, but this time its orbit and Earth's would be close. So close that Nibiru's size would shake the foundations of Earth. The Anunnaki knew this would have happened regardless if the humans were on Earth, so they allowed it.
At the very first glimmer of brightening dawn, there rose on the horizon a dark cloud of black, and bellowing within it was Adad, the storm god. The Anunnaki, remember the important gods, carried torches of fire, scorching the country with brilliant flashes. The stillness of the storm god passed over the sky, and all that was bright turned into darkness. For a day, the gales flattened the country. Quickly they blew, and then came the deluge. Even the gods took fright at the deluge. They left and went up to the heaven of Anu, lying like dogs curled up in the open. Sweet-voiced Belet Ili wailed, "The olden times have turned to clay." It's a complete reversion, right? Humans come from clay, and they've been returned to clay. Because I spoke evil in the God's assembly. How could I speak evil in the God's assembly and declare a war to kill my people? It is I who gave birth. Those people are mine. And now, like fish, they fill the ocean. For 6 days and 7 nights, there blew the wind, the downpour, the gale, the deluge. It flattened the land. But the 7th day, when it came, the gale relented. The deluge ended. The ocean that had thrashed like a woman in labor grew calm. The tempest grew still. The deluge ended. I looked at the weather, says Utnapishtim. It's hard to remember he's speaking, right? It's all first-person narrative. I looked at the weather. It was quiet and still, but all the people had turned to clay.
This is translations that you can read in a book called Myths from Mesopotamia. We, the great Anunna, all of us agreed together on a plan. Anu and Adad were to guard above. I was to guard the earth below. Where you went, you were to undo the chain and set us free. You were to release produce for the people. You were to exercise control by holding the balance. The warrior Elil, L gap of 30 lines. Vien, you imposed your loads on man. You bestowed noise on mankind. You slaughtered a god together with his intelligence. You must, and create a flood. It is indeed your power that shall be used against your people. You agreed to the wrong plan. Have it reversed. Let us make far-sighted Enki swear an oath. Enki made his voice heard Atrahasis III and spoke to his brother gods. Why should you make me swear an oath? Why should I use my power against my people? The flood that you mentioned to Mamet. What is it? I don't even know. Could I give birth to a flood? That is Elil's kind of work. Let him choose. Let Shulat and Hanish march ahead. Let Eriko pull out the mooring poles. Let Ninurta march. Let him make the weirs overflow. Gap of 2 or 3 lines to end of column. VM, gap of 31 lines. OBV, I the assembly, do not listen to, the gods gave an explicit command. Elil performed a bad deed to the people. Catch ink, Atrahasis, made his voice heard and spoke to his master, tablet ill, gap of about 10 lines. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to his master. Indicate to me the meaning of the dream. J, let me find out its portent. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. You say, I should find out in bed. 36. Make sure you attend to the message I shall tell you. Wall, listen constantly to me. Read Hut, make sure you attend to all my words. Dismantle the house, build a boat.
You can see the full documentary on my website. I have created a timeline that you can get to on my website, ourtruehistory.co.uk. The timeline doesn't use mainstream's timeframes because they are wrong. If you've watched any of my videos, you know that I show mainstream admitting their dates are wrong on so many things. For crying out loud, they even have the dates of the mummies wrong in Egypt. They have now pushed them back a whopping 1,000 years. So if you are interested in the world's best, more correct timeline of a vast number of events in our past, you should really check it out.
You could be thinking, hang on a minute. What if these ancient texts are wrong? What if it was a lucky guess that they talked about genetics and creating species? What if they made up the planets and by luck they were right? Well, I have covered this in a 3-hour documentary I made called The Lost Book of Our True History. Here is a snippet of that video.
We need to look at whether or not they are actually real characters. It's all well and good saying that they're son of kings and this, that and the other. There's some people out there that believe that the texts are just a comic book. In other words, if in 100 years' time or 1,000 years' time someone looked back and found Harry Potter, would they believe that Harry Potter books actually meant that there was someone alive at that point? So we need to now rule out that they're actually not just comic book characters, but they are actually real. So here we've got the Stanford Library's website, and it shows you here there are far more tablets in existence than I could have imagined. This is a person writing this for Stanford University. In fact, between 500,000 and 2 million cuneiform tablets are estimated to have been excavated in modern times by the Anunnaki. So then you've got to ask yourself, okay, well, is there any evidence that other than just texts that Enki and Enlil were alive? So here is the British Museum, and they actually have cylinder seals where they've, again, these are images, which I'll just show you here, images of various people, Enlil, Enki, and so on. And over here on the left-hand side, it says named on the inscription, Enki. So let's just go through some of these, there's loads. And another one here, another cylinder seal, and lo and behold, it's got Enki. And again, Enki, and another cylinder seal. So let's just say if this was a storybook that was written over 3,000 years up and down the whole of the Middle East, by people that probably couldn't read or write, there was only a handful of people that could read or write back then. So for them to write about Enki and then gets people to carve these tiny, this is only about an inch or two, this cylinder seal, and obviously this is what a tablet would look like. And again, this one's talking about, wait for it, Enki. Another one, you get the idea. Now this is an actual carving of Enki, so you'll see the turban style hat that he wore, so you can differentiate between Enlil, King Anu. So this is Enki with his long beard, and the bits in there are lapis lazuli. So they did themselves up with little bits of lapis lazuli to give it a braided appearance. But when they first came here, they had long hair and didn't braid it until they got here. And there's another carving of Enki, again genuine. Now this one's Enlil, talking about Enlil, this tablet. So obviously the brothers, there has to be Enlil as well. And here's Enki again. This one's in a museum. So this is an actual carving of Enki, again, you can tell by the turban style hat. A project that was funded by the European Union. So this is looking at basically Enkis and Enlils and whatever happened back in the Middle East. So this project looks at the temple. There was a temple that was made for Enki and one for Enlil. Both of them got unfortunately destroyed. You know, this whole project that they're doing for the European Union, would they, if they thought this was any way remotely to do with a storybook, would they spend so much time on writing about the size of the actual temple? The temple was a rectangle measuring 41 metres long by 23 metres in a single structure composed of a courtyard, sanctuary and 19 rooms and narrow chambers.
You can see the full 3-hour video from my website. Ask yourself this question: if we never had the Bible, never had any ancient tablets, never had any ancient mysteries like the pyramids, would we have made up a story about gods? No, we would have no reference for a god. None. We certainly wouldn't have pretended a god created us and then made temples for a fake entity. I say this because around the world there are cultures that talk about gods. Did they make them up? No. We know the Anunnaki traveled around the world, and that's why we have many places that talk about gods from the sky or heaven. Remember, heaven is space. Here are just some of them: Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Norse, Hindu, Chinese, Mayan, Incan, Aztec, Polynesian, including Maori, Japanese, Shinto. I have already covered and solved the Norse gods in a deep dive video documentary where I prove with evidence who some of the Norse gods were as Anunnaki. Over time, I'll be doing deep dive videos on the Greeks, Roman, Indian, Chinese, Mayan, and Egyptian. These videos will one show with evidence who the gods were as Anunnaki. Follow me or subscribe to keep up to date.
Did you know the Anunnaki were the first to show mermaids in carvings? In fact, a mermaid is not half human, it's half Anunnaki and half fish. If you want to find out more about this, yes, you know I've already done a long video covering the evidence for this. The Nazca lines are from the Anunnaki. They were there mining for gold. This was after the flood. The actual mountain range that has the top completely sliced off is roughly 3.7 miles, 6 kilometers. The holes that are on the top are from the machine they used. There is gold in Nazca. The Great Flood, tsunami, broke part of the mountain off which revealed the gold. Don't hate me for saying this next part. I'm really proud of my research. But yes, I'm the only one to work all these things out, and you can see the evidence in my videos. Göbekli Tepe was a silo for grain and animals, built with a roof on the top that got smashed off when the tsunami covered the land. No, Göbekli Tepe was not covered over deliberately by anyone. It was covered just like the buildings in the Middle East that are only just being uncovered now. Because of the Great Flood, remember to go watch my documentary on the Great Flood. I'm going to look at some of the main gods. The first one is Inanna, daughter of Nanna and Ningal, granddaughter of Enlil. Her story is well worth knowing. Inanna, also known as Ishtar in Akkadian, was a prominent goddess associated with love, beauty, sex, fertility, war, justice, and political power. One of the most captivating stories about Inanna revolves around her relationship with Dumuzi, also known as Tammuz, her beloved. Dumuzi was a shepherd god and represented the force of life and fertility. Here is the actual Anunnaki language. Yes, you will now hear the alien language. We know this, because what you are about to hear is a love poem in Inanna's own words, the person talking. I hope you enjoyed this video. The extended version is on patreon.com. Search Our True History. Remember, you can see all the other documentaries also. Just visit ourtruehistory.co.uk. Thank you for watching.